Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for coming together to immerse ourselves in this rich body of wisdom we call Torah. We receive it, we learn from it, and we contribute to it as well. And this week we are in Parshat Vayigash, which begins in the book of Genesis with chapter 44, verse 18. We will read through our English translation of it. I'll share with you a focused study about it, and then we'll open it up for our collaborative conversation about it. If you'd like to go ahead and unmute at this time, together we will have the opportunity to give thanks for the sharing of this moment. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kishanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Thank you, God, for the opportunity to immerse ourselves in words, deeds, and relationships of Torah. Let me share with you the opening verses, and I'll invite others to have an opportunity to read as well. Once again, book of Genesis, chapter 44, verse 18. Then Judah went up to him and said, "Please, my Lord, let your servant appeal to my Lord, and do not be impatient with your servant, you who are the equal of Pharaoh." My Lord asked his servants, "Have you a father or another brother?" We told my Lord, "We have an old father, and there is a child of his old age, the youngest. His full brother is dead, so that he alone is left of his mother, and his father dotes on him." Then you said to your servants, "Bring him down to me, that I may set eyes on him." We said to my Lord, "The boy cannot leave his father. If he were to leave him, his father would die." But you said to your servants, "Unless your youngest brother comes down with you, do not let me see your faces." When we came back to your servant, my father, we reported my Lord's words to him. Richard, would you like to read?
Yes. 25?
Yes.
Later our father said, "Go back and procure some food for us." We answered, "We cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us can we go down. For we may not show our faces to the man unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant my father said to us, 'As you know, my wife bore me 2 sons, but one is gone from me.' And I said, 'Alas, he was torn by a beast, and I have not seen him since. And if you take this one from me too, and he meets with disaster, you will send my white head down to Sheol in grief. Now if I come to your servant my father, and the boy is not with us, since his own life is so bound up with his, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. And your servants will send the white head of your servant our father down to Sheol in grief. Now your servant has pledged himself for the boy to my father, saying, 'If I do not bring him back to you, I shall stand guilty before my father forever.' Therefore, please let your servants remain a slave to my Lord instead of the boy, and let the boy go back with his brothers. For how can I go back to my father unless the boy is with me? Let me not be witness to the woe that would overtake my father."
Thank you. And Susan and David, would you like to continue there at the very start of chapter 45?
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, "Have everyone withdraw from me!" So there was no one else about when Joseph made himself known to his brothers. His sobs were so loud that the Egyptians could hear, and so the news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still well?" But his brothers could not answer him, so dumbfounded were they on account of him. Then Joseph said to his brothers, "Come forward to me." And when they came forward, he said, "I am your brother Joseph. he whom you sold into Egypt. Now do not be distressed or reproach yourselves because you sold me thither. It was to save life that God sent me ahead of you. It is now 2 years that there has been famine in the land, and there are still 5 years to come in which there shall be no yield from tilling. God has sent me ahead of you to ensure your survival on earth and to save your lives in an extraordinary deliverance. So it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt.
Hurry and go up to my father and say to him, your son Joseph said this, God has made me a lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, don't stand back. And you'll live in the land of Goshen, and you'll be close to me, you and your children and your children's children, and your flock and your oxen and everything you have. And I'll provide for you there, because there are 5 more years of famine. Or else you and your house and everything you have will be impoverished. And here, your eyes see, and the eyes of my brother Benjamin, that it's my mouth that speaks to you. And you'll tell my father of all my glory in Egypt and all that you've seen, and hurry and bring my father down here. And he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers spoke with him.
Thank you so much, both of you. Jim, would you like to continue there at verse 16?
Thank you, Rabbi. The news reached Pharaoh's palace. Joseph's brothers have come. Pharaoh and his courtiers have pleased. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, say to your brothers, do as follows. Load up your beasts and go at once to the land of Canaan. Take your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you shall live off the fat of the land. And you are bidden, do as follows. Take from the land of Egypt wagons for your children and your wives, and bring your father here. And never mind your belongings, for the best of all, the land of Egypt shall be yours. The sons of Israel did so. Joseph gave them wagons as Pharaoh had commanded, and he supplied them with provisions for the journey. To each of them, moreover, he gave a change of clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 pieces of silver and several changes of clothing. And to his father he sent the following 10 he-asses laden with the best things of Egypt, and 10 she-asses laden with grain, bread, and provisions for his father on the journey. As he sent his brothers off on their way, he told them, do not be quarrelsome on the way. They went up from Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. And they told him, Joseph is still alive. Yes, he is ruler over the whole land of Egypt. His heart went numb, for he did not believe them. But when they recounted all that Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. Enough, said Israel, is still alive. I must go and see him before I die.
Thank you, Jim. Jay, would you like to read a little bit at the very start of chapter 46?
Thank you, Rabbi. So Israel set out with all that was his, and he came to Beersheba, where he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. God called to Israel in a vision by night, Jacob, Jacob. He answered, here. And he said, I am God, the God of your father. Fear not to go down to Egypt, for I will make you there into a great nation. I myself will go down with you to Egypt, and I myself will also bring you back, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes, So Jacob set out from Beersheba. The sons of Israel put their father Jacob and their children and their wives in the wagons that Pharaoh had sent to transport him, and they took along their livestock and the wealth that they had amassed in the land of Canaan. Thus Jacob and all his offspring with him came to Egypt. He brought with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons, his daughters and granddaughters, all his offspring.
Thank you, Jay. Let me invite Norm if you'd like to continue there at verse 8.
I didn't realize ever before.
These are the names of the Israelites, Jacob and his descendants who came to Egypt. Jacob's firstborn, Reuben. Reuben's sons, Enoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. Simeon's son, Jemed, Jarman, Ohad, Yachin, Zohar, and Saul, the son of a Canaanite woman. Levi's women, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Judah's sons, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan had died in the land of Canaan, and Perez's sons were Hezron and Hamul. Issachar's sons, Tola, Huvah, Eob, and Shimron. Zebulun's sons, Sered, Elon, and Yalil. Those were the sons whom lay aboard to Jacob in Padam Aram, in addition to his daughter Dinah. Persons, all male and female, were 33. God's sons, Ziphion, Haggai, Shuni, Esbon, Eri, Arodi, and Areli. Asher's sons, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beriah, and their sister Sarah. Beriah's sons, Heber and Malchiel. These were the descendants of Zilpah, whom Laban had given to his daughter Leah. These she bore to Jacob, 16 sons. The sons of Jacob's wife Rachel were Joseph and Benjamin. To Joseph there was born in the land of Egypt Manasseh and Ephraim, whom Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, bore to him. Benjamin's sons, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Eri, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. These were the descendants of Rachel, who were born to Jacob, 14 persons at all. Dan's son, Hushim. Naphtali's sons, Jaziel, Guni, Jezer, and Shilem. These were the descendants of Bilhah, whom Laban had given to his daughter Rachel. These she bore to Jacob, 7 persons at all. All the persons belonging to Jacob who came to Egypt, his own issue, aside from the wives of Jacob's sons, all these persons numbered 66. And Joseph's sons who were born to him in Egypt were 2 in number. Thus the total of Jacob's household who came to Egypt were 70 persons.
Thank you, Norm. And Robert, would you like to continue there at verse 28?
Yes, thank you. And he sent Judah before him unto Joseph to direct his face unto Goshen. And they came unto the land of Goshen. And Joseph made ready his chariot and went up to meet Israel his father to Goshen, and presented himself unto him. And he fell on his neck and wept on his neck a good while. And Israel said unto Joseph, Now let me die, since I have seen thy face, because thou art yet alive. And Joseph said unto his brethren and unto his father's house, I will go up and show Pharaoh, and say unto him, My brethren and my father's house, which were in the land of Canaan, are come unto me, and the men are shepherds, for their trade hath been to feed cattle, and they have brought their flocks and their herds, and all that they have. And it shall come to pass, when Pharaoh shall call you, and shall say, What is your occupation? That ye shall say, Thy servant's trade hath been about cattle from our youth, even until now. Both we and also our fathers, that ye may dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination unto the Egyptians.
Thank you. Let me invite, let's see, Dave, would you like to continue where the verse, just towards the end there? Okay.
47 verse 1.
Yeah.
Then Joseph came and reported to Pharaoh, saying, my father and brothers, with their flocks and herds and all that is theirs, have come from the land of Canaan, and now in the region of Goshen. And carefully selecting a few of his brothers, he presented them to Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to his brothers, what is your occupation? And they answered Pharaoh, we, your servants, are shepherds, as we were also our fathers. We have come, they told Pharaoh, to sojourn in the land, for there is no pasture for your servants' flocks, the famine being severe in the land of Canaan. Pray then, let your servants stay in the region of Goshen. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, as regards your father and your brothers who have come to you, the land of Egypt is open before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land, and let them stay in the region of Goshen. And if you know some men of ability among them, put them in charge of my livestock.
Thank you, Dave. Let me invite Linda and Justin, if you'd like to continue there at verse 7 of chapter 47.
Thank you, Rabbi. Verse 7.
Yes.
So Joseph brought his father Jacob and stood him before Pharaoh. And Jacob greeted Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Jacob, how many are the days of the years of your life? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my sojournings are 130 years. The days of the years of my life have been few and miserable, and they have not reached the days of the years of the lives of my forefathers in the days of their sojournings. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and left Pharaoh's presence. Joseph settled his father and his brothers, and he gave them property in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had mandated. And Joseph sustained his father and his brothers and his father's entire household with bread, according to the young children. Now, there was no food in the entire land, for the famine had grown exceedingly severe, and the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan were exhausted because of the famine. And Joseph collected all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan with the grain that they were buying. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Now, the money was depleted from the land of Egypt and from the land of Canaan. And all the Egyptians came to Joseph saying, give us food. Why should we die in your presence since the money's been used up? And Joseph said, give me your livestock, and I will give you food in return for your livestock, if the money has been used up. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them food in return for the horses, and for the livestock in flocks, and in cattle, and in donkeys. And he provided them with food in return for all their livestock that year. That year ended, and they came to him in the second year, and they said to him, we will not hide from my lord, for insofar as the money and the property and animals have been forfeited to my lord, nothing remains before my lord except our bodies and our farmland. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our farmland? Buy us and our farmland for food, so that we and our farmland will be slaves to Pharaoh, and give us seed, so that we live and not die, and the soil will not lie fallow. So Joseph bought all the farmland of the Egyptians for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold each one his field, for the famine had become too strong for them, and the land became Pharaoh's. And he transferred the populace to the cities, from one end of the boundary of Egypt to its other end. Only the farmland of the priests did he not buy, for the priests had an allotment from Pharaoh, and they ate their allotment that Pharaoh had given them. Therefore, they did not sell their farmland. Joseph said to the people, let's see, it's a little up further. Joseph said to the, oh dear,
Hit the wrong button.
I think it's this one. Yeah. One more. Sorry.
It's okay.
We're in 47.
47, right.
Yes,
I just
47.
accidentally touched something incorrectly, so sorry.
Verse 23 of chapter 47.
Right, thank you so much. 23. Sorry. So Joseph said to the people, so sorry. Joseph said to the people, behold, I've bought you and your farmland today for Pharaoh. Behold, you have seed, so sow the soil. And it shall be concerning the crops, that you shall give a fifth to Pharaoh, and the remaining 4 parts shall be yours for seed, for your fields, for your food, for those in your houses, and for your young children to eat. They replied, you've saved our lives. Let us find favor in my Lord's eyes, and we will be slaves to Pharaoh. So Joseph made it a statute to this day concerning the farmland of Egypt, that the 1/5, of Egypt for the 1/5, only the farmland of the priests alone did not become Pharaoh's. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the land of Goshen, and they acquired property in it, and they were prolific and multiplied greatly.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. What an amazing story. That's our Torah portion for the week. And if you have a copy of the study sheet, I invite you to take it out at this point. I'd like to share with you a bit of focused study about it, and then we'll have our collective conversation about it. You know, last time when we looked at last week's portion, Miketz, I remarked that the word for last week's Torah portion, which gets translated in most of the editions into English as something like after or after this time, but that it comes from the Hebrew verb to cut something, to bring an end to something. So we're playing with the image that's conveyed both in the language and in the story itself about fragmentation and things being broken apart, and how Joseph's self estranges himself, breaks away, cuts himself off from these brothers who are before him, and he is still estranged, not only psychologically estranged and relationally estranged from them, but his appearance is such that he appears as a stranger to them. They don't recognize him. And we looked at the Hebrew, and we noticed that the same word that produces this word estrangement also produces the notion to come to know. So we explored a little bit last time about the relationship between estranging and becoming familiar. And I'd like to continue that theme in this week's Torah portion. And I noticed how much this word and this notion of becoming estranged, being a stranger, being foreign, is played out not just in this particular narrative, but it is something that plays out in a much broader narrative. So that's what I have here on the study sheet in number 1. And the study sheet for this week I've titled Estrangement and Reconstruction. So we'll see how that dynamic plays out. So number 1, I share with you some ways in which this notion of being a stranger, of being foreign, gets played out in the grand narrative. And just here, we find it in chapter 15, the book of Genesis, where God is telling Abraham, know well that your offspring shall be strangers, ger, in a land not theirs. So this, in a sense, this promise that's being made to Abraham from the source of all life is, as you become embraced, as you embrace this mission that I'm giving you, of heading towards fulfillment and promise is going to involve a period of being estranged within the wider world. You will be strange in a land that's not theirs. And then a little bit later, when Sarah dies and then Abraham seeks to find a place to bury her, he says to the Hittites before him, I am a stranger and an inhabitant among you. So he's sharing these two aspects of his own identity in the moment. On the one hand, he's there living among them all, so he's an inhabitant with them, but there's also some way in which he's also a stranger to them all. He's separate from them all. And then, of course, we encounter Joseph when he becomes sold into slavery in Egypt, and then he's tossed into prison because of this accusation that Potiphar makes about that he had improper advances towards her. And then he gets brought out of the prison, and he's able to interpret Pharaoh's dreams, and then he marries the daughter of an Egyptian priest. And then Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, meaning God made me forget my parental home. And the second he named Ephraim, meaning God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction. So here, Joseph, in this moment of success, in this moment of being embraced and rewarded by the leader of the greatest empire in the world, is now starting to make a home life for himself that includes having these two children that carry with them this memory, if you will, this embedded memory through the names that they are that they represent an estrangement from the home that Joseph grew up in them. And then, as we said last week, we looked at this notion about when Joseph appears in front of his brothers who are seeking grain, they don't recognize him. It says Joseph made himself strange to them. So there's some way in which he is now confronted with his family, and he's either deepening his sense of separation from his family, or one way of understanding is further deepening this sense of estrangement is a pathway to becoming reunited with them. And then, of course, later we will, in Exodus, we'll meet Moses, and Moses, again, he will marry, and he will have a son, Gershom. And he says, Gershom, because I have been a stranger in a strange land. So there's all this imagery that's conveyed, not just in this immediate Torah portion, but throughout the grand narrative of estrangement being some key part of this overall journey that these characters and the people of Israel themselves are on. Okay, then if you turn over our study sheet, we look at the opening of this week's Torah portion, which says, Then Judah approached him. And the Hebrew for approached him is Vayigash, which is the name for this week's Torah portion. And that Hebrew word Yigash comes from the Hebrew verb nagash, to draw near. So although this story, of course, is focusing on Joseph, here this week's Torah portion, I want to suggest the real protagonist is Judah. And to Judah is given this notion of drawing near. And it might mean, on the one hand, that he steps forward physically, but there is a lot of commentary that suggests this drawing near is really a psychological step that Judah is able to take, that he's able to access something within Joseph, that he's able to, in a sense, reach him on some level, and that opens up this dynamic that allows Joseph to finally kind of reveal himself. And then we have this phrase Joseph could no longer control himself. The Hebrew is lechitapik, and that comes from the Hebrew word afek, which means to hold, be strong. And in its reflexive form, which is how it appears in our Torah portion, it means to restrain oneself. And the noun from this same Hebrew verb gives the noun to a channel or a stream bed. So there's something about Judah's capacity because of his own, I want to suggest, his own estranged dynamic that he's been through in a story that we read previously about Tamar, where he has a sexual encounter with his daughter-in-law Tamar, whom he doesn't know is Tamar. He thinks that she is a prostitute on the roadside. And then months later, Tamar is brought before him and said, look, this woman is a single woman and she's pregnant. And the punishment for that is to be burned. And still not recognizing that this is in fact his daughter-in-law, she says, the man who fathered this child, it belongs to this signet and the stick that I have. And immediately Judah recognizes that they're his. So she has disclosed to Judah who she is. She's disclosed who the father is. And at that point, Judah is the chief of this tribe that she's been brought before. And he could, on the one hand, uphold the tradition of committing to death this woman, and thereby also avoiding his own complicity in her state of being a single woman who's pregnant. But instead, he's so moved, I want to suggest, by the gracious way in which she has announced herself and announced quietly just between the two of them who is the father of the child, that he says, she's more just than I am. We should honor her. So he has gone through this process that allows him to somehow relinquish this authority and this power that he has as head of a tribe to grant life to this woman and thereby to grant life to the children that she's carrying. So it's in that state of having experienced what it means to lower oneself for the sake of justice, what it means to possibly have lost not only this woman, but the children that he fathered, that he's able to be the one, even though he's not the oldest son, he's the one of the brothers who steps forward to Joseph and pleads the case for why Benjamin should not be sent back, because if Benjamin remained in Egypt, father Jacob would die. When Joseph hears that, apparently, it causes him to lose control of himself. It causes the waters to flow through this channel, this stream bed. And as a result, he's able to overcome this distance that he has created and is able to embrace. And it causes the family to be reunited, and it causes a great fruition and fertility to everyone. So I want to just play a little bit with this notion about how sometimes different fractions and disorientations are thrust upon us by external events, and sometimes we create them within ourselves as a way to get through difficult moments. So I want to share with you our artist for this week. If you turn over, we have this portrait by Lachos Tichani of Tristan Tzara. So before we go into the painting itself, just a little bit about these individuals, the artist and the subject of the painting. So Lachos Tichani was born in was born in Hungary, and he was born in a country that had. He was born in, I believe it was 18. Let's see if I have it. About 1890, if I have that right, 1886, I think. And he was born into a Hungary that at the time had just been, by the time he was an adult, was shattered. It had been under the Habsburg Empire for 700 years. In 1918, it is broken apart and becomes all these separate countries, and it becomes a place of chaos. And there are, in the year following that, there are these series of left-wing communist governments which don't succeed, and eventually by 1919, rightist elements within the country take over and begin generations of right-wing governments in Hungary. Lajos was born at the age of 11. He contracted meningitis. He was not able to speak or to hear. He was interested in becoming an artist. There was no school of fine art in Hungary at the time. And with everything that was happening within Hungary at the age of 24 or so, he leaves Hungary and eventually goes to Paris, where he becomes part of the art community in Paris. And while he's there, he becomes particularly enamored of all the modernist movements, including especially post-impressionism and expressionism and cubism. And we're going to look at his painting in just a moment and look at, the way in which cubism plays into this theme of fracturing that we've been discussing. So he paints his portrait is that of Tristan Tzara. Tristan Tzara grows up in Romania, and he is born with into a Hebrew family, to a Jewish family, and he is his name at birth is Samuel Rosenstock, and he leaves when he's born. Jews are not even allowed in Romania to be full citizens. So that is a level of estrangement from the country that he's born into when he's born in 1896 in Monesti, Romania. Half of that community that he's born into is Jewish, but it is a disenfranchised community. He's born as Samuel Rosenstock. He leaves Romania in 1919, also to become embedded in the art community there. And he changes his name from Samuel Rosenstock to Tristan Tzara, which either can be understood in Romanian as meaning sad in the land, or perhaps from Hebrew, exiled from community. So his name carries this sense of being estranged from a place. He becomes a founder of Dadaism, and Dadaism was a movement immediately after World War I that disavowed Western rationality, which it saw as one of the foundational causes of the barbarism that had erupted in the early 20th century, climaxing with World War I. So Dadaism embraces intentional irrationality, the rejection of traditional artistic, historical, and religious values. He becomes both a writer as well as a kind of theoretical founder of Dadaism, and he also engages in performance art. And much of his performance art that he does in Paris, he would take words out of a newspaper and he'd cut them up, and then he'd reassemble them into some kind of order that made no logical sense whatsoever. And sometimes he would just get up on a stage and he would just start shouting words that would end up in something like, it's all nothing, 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 it makes no sense, nothing, nothing, nothing. So this is all quite scandalous and absolutely disruptive for those who were seeking some kind of coherence within his art. So here is Tikhani, who paints this picture of Zara, and it is a Cubist painting, meaning that the Cubists rejected these 500 years of the dominance of Renaissance artistic standards and styles and sense of perspective and everything. And the Cubists broke down images into their geometric forms and into the multiplicity of planes that every object, they said, is made up of. And so they exploded open, they fractured, if you will, into component parts, the images that they sought to place on canvas. So that is the painting that I'm sharing with you. It's a painting done by two Jews who had to flee the land that they grew up in, one of whom completely changed his name, carrying within his name this sense of dislocation and exile, one of whom painted in a Cubist style that fractured reality in order to capture a greater reality, and one of whom founded an artistic movement that valued the irrational as a way to kind of distance oneself from the rationality that had produced World War I. So I also want to share with you another character, and that's Paul Celan. Paul Celan is born also in Romania. He is born, not Paul Cézanne, Paul Celan rather. He's born in 1920 as Paul Anschel. And his father was a Zionist and insisted that his son learn Hebrew. And so he was sent to a Hebrew Jewish school called Safa Ivriya, which means Hebrew language. His mother, on the other hand, who was also Jewish, was an avid reader of German literature, and she insisted on Austrian German being the language that was spoken in the household. So here is this man, Paul Anschel, growing up in Romania, who is sent to learn Hebrew at a Jewish school, and then when he returns home, the mother insists that he speak in Austrian German and read German literature. In 1942, when the Nazis reconquest Romania, the mother and the father are immediately arrested. For a short time, Paul himself manages to escape and then is captured. The father and the mother are immediately sent off to labor camps. The father dies while in captivity from typhus, and the mother is shot. And Paul is sent to a labor camp where he is until 1944, when the Red Army approaches, and then he's able to escape. So he then flees to Paris, first to Vienna, and then eventually to Paris, where he becomes part of the art community there. And he changes his name from Paul Anschel to Paul Celan. And Celan is understood to be kind of an acronym of the name that he was born with, Anschel. So again, he's carrying with him this reconfigured name that is evocative of the past, but it's also a break from the past. And Celan spends the rest of his life writing poetry, and he insists upon writing in German, the language that first his mother valued so much, but it was also the language of the people that murdered his mother and father. And he, in a sense, he's trying to use language redemptively. So rather than abandoning this German language, he's hoping that somehow it will be a source of reconstitution for him and redemption. He's also has these terrible mental problems. He's treated for schizophrenia. He is placed in psychiatric wards and then released and then sent back to them. And tragically, he eventually jumps off a bridge in Paris and drowns himself. And I share with you just a bit of a poem that he wrote. Mute autumn aromas, the marguerite unbroken, pass between home and chasm through your memory. A strange lostness was palpably present. Almost you would have lived. This notion about a strange lostness was palpably present, I think, is what he carried with him. He escaped something, but never really escaped it. He carried it with him even as he changed his name. He carried all this past with him. And the notion about his desire to kind of revive himself and his culture through the writing is an effort that apparently he was both an act of compulsion and perhaps also an act that led to his own causing his own life. So I share all this with you just with this notion that we're experiencing here this disorientation, this fracturing that's happening within the family, this fracturing perhaps that's happening within Joseph himself. And what Torah seems to be sharing with us is sometimes these fractures happen as a result of external events over which we have no control. And sometimes we make creative use of fracturing, of disorienting ourselves as a way to birth new possibilities. And this week's Haftarah portion comes from the prophet Ezekiel. Prophet Ezekiel lived during a time of deep fracture within the Israelite world. He lived both before and after the Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem and the taking into exile of the leadership. And so he preached. And the section that we have for this week's Haftarah portion is God speaking in a vision to Ezekiel, instructing him to engage in a very material project here of taking sticks. Let me share those verses with you. Mortal, take a stick and write on it for Judah and Israelites associated with it. And take another stick and write on it for Joseph, Ephraim's stick, and all the house of Israel associated with it. Bring them together, every one of them as one stick, that they may be as one in your hand. Here is this divine voice who is urging Ezekiel during this time of separation between the north and the southern tribes of Israel as a result of the Babylonian invasion. And he's saying, write sticks with one stick carrying names of the northern tribes and another stick carrying the names of the southern tribes, and bring them together, and they shall be as one. So it is this vision of an eventual reunification of the Jewish people, and perhaps also, in a sense, an individual psychological reunification. This notion of doing something, these sticks, as a way to participate in a ritualized way of reuniting. So here in the case of both Jewish culture as a whole and in terms of our holy literature, this notion of fracturing describes both the realities that we experience and also something about our cultural way of handling these separations and these fracturings, and that we have the capacity to bring wholeness out of the fracturing that we experience. So with that, I'd love to know what you experienced, what you saw, what you felt, what you tasted and heard, and felt within yourself as we went through this week's Torah portion. Rose, go ahead, and then I'll call upon Catherine and others who raise their hands as well.
Thank you, Rabbi. I'm just looking at the text. First of all, a lot of the stuff about Judah was probably written later on because there's always good PR for Judah. In the Torah, that's just the way it is. He always looks like a great guy, but so I think it was a political thing. But speaking of politics, Pharaoh and Joseph were actually not very politically astute, because what happens during a time of famine, Pharaoh favors Joseph's family and gives them all of this stuff, gives them land. Meanwhile, Joseph is busy disenfranchising all the Egyptians, turning them into serfs, basically. And so that you can see, this was sowing the seeds, as it were. I mean, Joseph is giving them seeds, but the seeds that actually get sown are the seeds of resentment against the Jews, against B'nai Jacob. When the Egyptians see what's happening while they're suffering and they're being disenfranchised, these guys are getting all this stuff. So it's very interesting. The other thing that interested me just for a second is in Jacob's dream, back when he was fighting the man, and they said, "Hereforth you'll be known as Israel." But when Hashem appears to him in the dream, he calls him Jacob. He doesn't say his name is Israel. He says his name is Jacob. And that kind of interested me. And the fact that also the brothers were so worried about how Jacob would feel if they took Benjamin. They weren't worried about Jacob falling down dead when they told him the lie about Joseph. So I found all that interesting.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Rose. Let me call upon Catherine. We'll start weaving together some of these points. Catherine?
Yes, thank you, Rabbi. I have a slightly different reading. I was struck this time in this Parshat about how, in a way, these displacements, which end up in some kind of resilience, right, in the face of famine, sort of serve as a prelude to Exodus. In other words, you have this ability of people to move across borders, sort of assimilate in a way to a certain extent in a new place and find a way of staying together, which I think is probably, I mean, as you already mentioned, one of the ultimate messages of the Parshat. I mean, that people's relationships matter more than a place that you call home.
Say a little bit more about that. Relationships matter more than place.
Well, that they really are not, they don't even question whether they should leave Canaan to go to Egypt. Jacob himself had been moving around, but what mattered was how these relationships can be restored and held together.
So what you're suggesting is at least the emphasis in the story right now has to do with all these relationships, and place takes a background and relationships take a foreground.
Yes.
Wow, that's fascinating. Thank you. You want to add some more?
I'm still mulling over it.
Okay.
That's all I have right now.
Thank you. That's rich. Let me call upon David and Susan.
Along with all of this this confusion kind of about who people are and what they and accepting who they are in relationship to each other, I found it very interesting. I think it was in Genesis 46:4, when God comes to Jacob, and I never got it before, but he says, I myself will also bring you back, and Joseph's hand shall close your eyes, meaning that he will, in fact, he should go ahead and make the trip because he will see Joseph before he dies. Joseph will be there when he dies.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just found that touching.
Yeah, it's very touching, isn't it? Thank you. And David, did you want to say something? No. Okay, then let me call upon Richard here.
Yes, just very briefly, but I have this idea, I can't express it very well, but what you're saying about about Joseph losing himself there for a bit, and Ionesco, and the Dada movement, and what was going on in Romania there at that time, when pre-World War I, and how anti-Semitism was coming, and one group of people were not particularly liked, and usually it's the Jews. And that was happening now, and they got possessions down there in Egypt, bad. That's not the place to be. That was a mistake that's often put together, talked about, of the Jews making the mistake of settling there. And the third piece that I'm most troubled about is that's what's going on in America, with the idea of, okay, we're going to get technocrats from another country that are not native here because they're going to be more skilled, and we're being told that we'll just get 2 years of college for our people. That stew is still going on here, and I'm beginning to feel the same way the rhinoceros did in Ionesco's play. The only thing you can do is scream about it, or try to be gentle with your neighbors to make a group of people more capable of governance. When we say that we love our nature, we don't love our nature like ourselves, we love our neighbor as ourselves, to get the idea that the human community is one body and not off into these groups. And we've got all these groups struggling, and they're in Romania, which is what this cubist is telling us. And if we look at his eyes, it's hard to know whether those eyes are looking back in the head or looking out. Just puzzled by what has happened in the world. And I think this speaks very much to what's going on today.
Wow. Other thoughts or comments, contributions? This notion about what Richard just shared made me think about the role of the absurd within Jewish culture, and the role of the mad person within Jewish culture, or the role of humor, if you want, within Jewish culture, the role of the absurd. So, especially within the Hasidic tradition, there are all these stories that are told, and oftentimes they're children's stories about the people of Chelm, who are pious and devout, but they're also absurd in their outlook of reality. And there's a very special place within the Jewish tradition that is held for the absurd. And it's no wonder that out of that culture comes someone like Kafka, for example. And or equally so, it's it's not strange that out of that rich culture, someone like Mel Brooks should emerge, right? There is a beloved place for the absurdist as a source of wisdom, because the absurdist shatters our attempts to create only images that are coherent and singular, and the absurdist steps forward and shatters that, and in a sense that's what Tristan Tzara did with his work as a Dadaist, and it wasn't meant meanly. I don't think. I think it was meant as a way to create a break from what he saw as the kind of thinking that had led to the mass horrors of World War I, that we need a new way of thinking. And so the absurdist steps forward and shatters our facade of gentility and rationality, which is really just sustaining an environment of violence. Okay, and so I don't know how many of you have seen the movie A Complete Unknown, the movie about Bob Dylan. I haven't. Okay, but in 1965, in August of 1965, I went to a concert of Bob Dylan's in Forest Hills. And that was just a month after the concert at Newport, where he did electric music for the first time and created such a stir. And so at the concert in Forest Hills a month later, the first set that he did was acoustic. It was all these songs that people had grown, so fond of and were so insistent upon him singing only those songs, Blowing in the Wind and so forth. And then there's a break, and then the second set starts. He comes on stage, he's carrying an electric guitar, and then on stage with him comes Robbie Robertson and Levon Helm, who would form the band, Al Cooper, who played the organ, Harvey Brooks, who played electric bass. And all of a sudden the booing starts. And I remember someone literally ran up to the stage with an acoustic guitar and placed it on the stage and begged Dylan to play the acoustic guitar and to give up the electric music. And instead, what Dylan did with Robbie Robertson, Levon Helm, and Al Cooper, and Harvey Brooks, and so forth, they started launching into this really driving electric music and started singing Like a Rolling Stone, and started singing Maggie's Farm, Everybody Wants You to Be Just Like Them, I'm Trying to Be the Best I Can, Everyone Wants You to Be Just Like Them. And it's this concert, and people are booing, and they're playing this music and singing these songs, and it was absolutely an explosive revelatory experience. Because in a sense, at that very moment, what Dylan was doing was saying, you can carry the cause of freedom, you can mix in some Rimbaud symbolist poetry, and you can throw in some hard-kicked rock and roll music, and you can have fun, and it's all going to happen out on Highway 61. And Highway 61, in that sense, represents a place of both sense and nonsense. Okay, and that's where we are. That's what this road is. That's what this road is. It's full of a lot of sense and a lot of nonsense. Stuff that there's a lot of logic that's happening within Torah, and there's a lot of stuff that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I think Torah is trying to tell us, yeah, that's the way life is. It's out on Highway 61. Yeah. And so I think Torah is trying to, I think, share with us the notion that if we're only constantly trying to make sense of everything, we'll lose the meaning of it all. And so this is a story about how important it is to value uncertainty, to value ambiguity, as much as it is to value responsibility and making sense of things. And so I'm sorry, I see Mark, you wanted to share something, and Robert too. Let me call upon you. Go ahead, Mark, and then Robert.
Well, first of all, I didn't know that you were a Dylan fan, and you didn't tell us whether you approved of his change
I
in
loved
musical style. Good.
I loved it.
figured you would.
Yeah.
And that was for Dylan. That was his sense of estrangement, deliberate estrangement, to test the waters. Took a lot of courage. But I mean, when we think about estrangement, we always think about what the sacrifice is, what person has to absorb in terms of how it affects the rest of their life when they decide to pursue that path. I mean, I was thinking of Spinoza again. You know, here's a person who actively pursued estrangement from the community, and it persisted throughout his life. And I always wonder, how did this affect him personally? I mean, what sacrifice did he have to make in terms of relationships? And the artist that you mentioned, you know, that's an example of estrangement. That was it to his benefit ultimately or not? That's a question.
Yeah. Thank you. So it's a profound question about Spinoza as a philosopher, and there's also about those who are seeking to be artists. Most artists, so many artists are not seeking acceptance. They're seeking creation. They're seeking expression. And oftentimes that means just going their own way. You know, they're expressing who they are rather than trying to capture a market, you know. Let me call upon Robert. Yeah, please.
Well, thank you again for a lovely evening. I hope you'll forgive me for this comment, but anybody who practices, this is my own feeling, any kind of art, who really does it for popularity instead of the purity, I would say is a very limited artist. True artist does it for the love of the art. It's a love affair, whatever our capacity. That's just my understanding. And I think that's why we have individuals who, in their lifetimes, they weren't recognized, but after their lifetime, they were. And the same thing is true with Moses, for example. And I think, Baha'is hold Moses in the same regard we hold Baha'u'llah. But look how many years afterwards it took for humanity to even be familiar with what Moses had accomplished. What I really wanted to say, I've been using on the comments and on the chapter, Joseph was a towering figure. Imagine, contrast his behavior and his character with someone who has that kind of power today in government. Because Pharaoh had a government, it was kingship. But he never betrayed, never took anything that wasn't his. He wielded with great wisdom. And what's interesting, even after he took the land, he took nothing. Because they still were on the land, but they gave a fifth part to government, which is fair. Government needs funds for a variety of things. And it made me think of the Native Americans' understanding of land. And their understanding is you can't own it, which in truth is true, except for about 6 by 4 and maybe 6 feet deep. At the end, that's all we get. And so I thought it was just very interesting. It's a story of somebody who's been betrayed, and through the grace of God and his own energies rose and never betrayed, set an example of serving. And then the justness of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh had no fear at all. He could trust Joseph to the point where he had no fear that giving him all this power, he would try and take it. I mean, what a tribute to character. And so those are just a few of my thoughts. I always enjoy the evenings and the
Thank you
talk.
so much, Robert. You know, as you're talking, I'm realizing, let me just first of all check with David and Susan. Did either one of you want to have another comment? Your hands up.
Actually, we both do.
Okay.
We saw the movie. We saw No Connection Home.
Okay.
What came out of it for me, one of the big takeaways from that movie was that one of the reasons that Bob Dylan went electrical was he did not like being on stage alone.
Oh.
He wanted to be supported by others.
Oh, sweet.
Yeah.
Community.
That's sweet.
We have a little family that the family was doing the producing. I have a grenade to throw. The last part of this Torah portion, when I think it was Linda was reading, it was so vivid to me that this is a story of our hero in surfing. It can actually be translated as enslaving the Egyptian people. All these things we're admiring, Robert's admiring, and this wonderful administrator resulted in a society that is one that we consider quite evil now, where all the people are tied to the land and are owned by the king. It reminds me of how Torah was used to justify slavery in the 1840s, 50s, and 60s, because it's not illegal in Torah, slavery. It's something with rules.
Okay. Just to be clear, the slavery that we're talking about in the 19th century is not what's being referred to here. This is indentured, some kind of level of indentured status.
It can be arguably said the first historical of a society becoming serfed and tied to the land.
Okay, so I appreciate what you're saying, and I don't relate to this as a historical document. It's a work of art that's seeking to share something about life and about one's encounter moving through life in search of wholeness. So whatever these scenes mean to you historically, I understand, and I'm looking at it as these are images seeking to create, as any work of art seeks to stir something in us. So what you got me to think about is going back to the origins of this story, this journey that we're on, this painting that's being painted, this grand piece, this triptych that we call Tanakh. And that is the notion of Abraham, who's the one that really begins the journey of the Israelites, and how it is a journey that begins with this notion of the need to separate, and you're going to be separating from something that you're never going to go back there. Unlike other hero journeys, the hero is not going to return with something of value back from where he started. It's a departure, it's a separation, it's a break. And that notion about this whole narrative that continues not just in the books of Moses, but also through the prophets and the writings, is a series of breaks, of heroic movements, and then failure of character. It's about a coming home and then a separation from home. And of course, the Bible itself ends with yet another exile, and no answer as to whether or not there's a return from that exile. So, when I think about Abraham, I realized, and I was talking about Dylan and Highway 61, that's how the song starts off, if I'm remembering it right. It starts off
with gun out on Highway 61.
Yeah,
God said to Abraham, kill me a son.
Yeah, God said to Abraham, kill me a son.
Yeah.
Yeah. God, let me share. So thank you, everyone. I'm so glad you know it all. God said to Abraham, kill me a son. And Abe said, man, you must be putting me on. God said, no. Abe said, what? And then God said, you can do what you want, Abe, but the next time you see me coming, you better run. And God said, where you want this killing done? Out on Highway 61. So Highway 61, is this scene where it makes sense and it doesn't make sense. It's taken us somewheres, but I have no idea where it is we're going. And so that's what Torah prepares us for. I think it doesn't give us comfort and certainty. It gives us the tools to deal with what real life is all about, which is moments of being settled and then moments of being uprooted, whether physically or psychologically. Moments of great clarity and moments of ambiguity. It's about how to live with a sense of living through all those with a sense of equanimity and balance. So, and as Susan beautifully pointed out about describing that Dylan may have given up that standing alone at a microphone with an acoustic guitar and wanted to be surrounded by friends in a band where they were playing music together and it was electric, that it had as much to do with being part of a family. So that's what makes this journey really possible, is to be in communion with companions. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being companions with me on this journey. And God bless you all. I look forward to our next gathering. Be well, everyone. God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a very interesting evening.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Mm-hmm.